Okay, so now that we have reviewed the POD from the previous lesson, that brings us into our new lesson 2-3 on dividing directed line segments into partition. And for those of you who do not know what a partition is, it's just a part of. So if we were thinking in terms of segments, if I drew a segment here, right, segment AB, if I partition the segment means that I am dividing the segment into parts, okay? Various parts, all right? So that's all that means. So, of course, you are responsible for doing the problem of the day, and in the next lesson, I'll go over it with you guys. But today's mini lesson, our essential understanding is that a directed line segment is a segment between 2 points A and B with a specified direction from A to B or from B to A. To partition a directed line segment is to divide it into two segments with a given ratio. All right, so this is just pretty much splitting the segment, not into half, but into sections with a given ratio, all right, as it stated here before. And there is a pretty lengthy formula of how we would usually calculate this. Don't worry, it's not as intimidating as it looks, okay? So the first step, whenever you get a ratio, let's say the ratio is 3 to 5, right? What this means is that it's actually 3 parts out of the length of 8, okay? So that you have the ratio 3 to 5. So what you will do in order to find the ratio, this will be considered A and this will be B. So your ratio would be A over A plus B, which is actually 3 over 8, okay? So anytime you have a ratio, you're gonna label it A and B, and it will be just A over A plus B. So this number over the total sum of these two numbers, okay? Then you need to label your coordinates. They will give you coordinates for X and Y, or A and B. So let's say X is coordinate 3, 2, and Y is coordinate 5, 8. So you will just label your coordinates like we have done in the past, right? So this is my X sub 1, this is my Y sub 1, this is my X sub 2, and this is my Y sub 2. Now, be mindful that the first coordinate is always going to be your starting point. Please write this down. It's always going to be your starting point, and it's very important because we need to use this, all right? We're gonna use all of it, but we really need to you really need to pinpoint what your starting point is. And then once you have everything labeled, you're just going to plug it into the formula here, all right? It's going to be a lot more simpler than it looks, trust me. So let's look at example 1. It says, find point Q along the directed line segment from point R, -3, 3 to point S, 6, -3 that divides a segment into the ratio of 2 to 1. So let's go back and extract some of the information based on the instructions. So what is my ratio here? Well, it says that the ratio is 2 to 1, which is actually, excuse me, 2 over 3. Remember, this is A and B, so it'll be A over A plus B, which is 2/3, all right? Now, the second thing we need to do is get the points. So we have our starting point, which is R. So I like to label that SP for starting point. So my SP is -3, 3, all right? Now, I like to do all of this work beforehand so it doesn't look as complicated when I'm plugging it into the formula. All right, so this essentially is my change in the X values and my change in the Y values. So I put delta x, which is the change in x, and that's why you need to label your coordinates. So the points we have here is r, which is -3, 3, and then s, which is 6, -3. And when I label my coordinates, this is x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So now when I do my change in x, it'll be x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which is equal to 6 minus -3, which gives me 9, all right? And then I do the same thing for the y value. So my change in y is y sub 2 minus y sub 1. This should look familiar. It's actually slope. All right, and your y sub 2 value is -3 minus my y1 value, which is 3, which gives me -6. So guess what? I have my ratio, I have my starting point, I have my change in x and my change in y. So now all I have to do is plug it in to find point Q. Point Q is what is partitioning the segment, where the segment will be partitioned, the coordinate that it will be partitioned at. So point Q is going to be equal to, right, my starting point, which is my x value, which is -3. So this is x and this is y, plus my ratio, which is 2/3, times the change in x.